Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you all for joining this unfortunately very timely webinar to roll out JINSA's new report entitled Israel's Coming Northern War, a U.S. Israel Strategy to Defeat Hezbollah. I'm Jonathan Ruhe, JINSA's Director of Foreign Policy. To discuss the issues covered in this report and their context in the course of ongoing events, I'm particularly pleased to be joined today by the heart of JINSA's order. We've got our Randi and Charles Wax Senior Fellow, John Hanna, our Julian and Jenny Josephson Senior Vice President for Israeli Affairs, IDF General Yaakov Ayish, and JINSA Distinguished Fellow, IDF General Yaakov Amidror. This comprehensive report, which you can find front and center on our website, explains how Hezbollah's decision last October 8th to launch a war of choice against Israel is driving toward a war of necessity for the Jewish state. It also lays out a new U.S.-led strategy to address these threats and to deter Iran and the rest of its axis from broadening and dragging out this conflict. Hezbollah's most immediate threat to Israel's north, including barrages of projectile attacks and the remaining potential for an even worse October 7th style invasion, has essentially deprived Israel of sovereignty in the north of its own country since last October, as U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken even recently admitted. And even if this threat is removed one way or another, which certainly will be challenging enough, Hezbollah will still possess large strategic arsenals, which can threaten catastrophic, perhaps even unprecedented damage on Israel, and which serve to shield Iran's near imminent achievement of nuclear weapons capability. Meanwhile, months of U.S.-led diplomatic efforts for an Israel-Hezbollah ceasefire have stalled out, as Hezbollah vows to keep up its attacks on Israel at least until there is a ceasefire in Gaza. Yet the U.S. keeps calling for all sides to de-escalate, even though the pace and lethality of Hezbollah's attacks have only grown as Washington adheres to this talking point over time. This report and its recommendations form the backdrop for today's discussion, which also comes on the heels of the largest spike in tensions between Israel and Hezbollah since last October 8th. Recently, Israel has also announced a new phase of the conflict and has made the return of its tens of thousands of displaced civilians to the north an official objective of the war. Before we discuss this, Nolan, if you could please bring up a quick map that JINSA has put together to illustrate graphically how the attacks since the start of the weekend, have affected the operational and tactical picture. I would just point everyone's attention to this map that illustrates, among other things, the growing expanse of Hezbollah's recent strikes on Israel. To our audience, I would just remind you, if you have questions for our panelists, please type them into the Q&A box on the bottom of your screen, and I'll do my best to address them in the time we have. So to start off, General Ayish, I'll go to you first. What is Israel's plan, to borrow the official phrase, to change the balance of power with Hezbollah to affect Hezbollah's calculus? What is new about what we're seeing?
In order to have a better understanding about that, let me start by saying that we are going to focus this evening on Hezbollah, and as we speak, things are unfold in Lebanon, and over here, and suddenly, what was just published by JINSA become literally reality. But everything is orchestrated, as we know, from Iran. So in the last 11 months, we discussed here, most of our sessions, Hamas. And today we are going to discuss the most significant element that was built by Iran for different purposes. And in order to understand its importance, we should take a close look at what have happened in the last 11 months and how important they were, and what have happened in the last, I would say, 7 days with Hezbollah. And for that, let me describe a few elements. Hezbollah is a very powerful terror army, not less than that, not terror organization, terror army with an arsenal that most of the European countries doesn't hold. And everyone is fully aware to the 150,000 different type of rockets, but people tend to dismiss the accuracy developments that they have achieved lately, the UAVs, their ability to build the Radwan unit that was built and trained by Iran, and later on was very involved during the civil war in Syria. And all of that created a situation where you can find Hezbollah highly relevant in the south part of Lebanon, in the area of Beirut, with an industrial base dug well under the ground in the Bekaa Valley and elsewhere. And these formidable capabilities were built first and foremost to be the Iranian ability to deter Israel from attacking its nuclear facilities. And that was the first reason. And once we have it in mind, everything will be in context. That was the reason why Hezbollah was going on a very thin line in the last 11 months and trying to use only part of its capabilities where everything is well calculated. And on one hand, they wanted to show solidarity. On the other hand, they wanted to show that they are not deterred. And on the third, they wanted to show the region and the other players that they are willing to go all the way. What was significantly changed in the last 8 days is challenging Hezbollah and challenging Iran. Because suddenly, the way Israel retaliated a week ago and yesterday and today, and let me emphasize immediately that this is only 5 to 10% from the capacity that Israel can perform when it comes to Hezbollah, not less than that. What Israel did in the last week suddenly changed the equation. And let me start by talking about the ability to eliminate their military leadership. And we are talking here about people who General Amidror and myself are familiar with in the last 30, 35 years. We know them a few decades. That's how significant they were until they were eliminated lately. And we should be very open here. And they created a lot of casualties to Israeli forces during the days that we were in Lebanon, not only to Israeli forces, also American forces in Beirut and some other sites, globally speaking. But once they were eliminated, the equation was changed. They were trying first and foremost to calculate their moves, but they are stuck in a very significant dilemma right now, which is, should they retaliate and use their arsenal to retaliate towards Israel? And then Iran would lose one of the major proxies that it built for a case that Israel will attack the nuclear facilities, or should they avoid it? And by that, they will lose their credit. All the high words that Nasrallah was using in the last 11 months. So it's a very major dilemma, and that's where they are at the moment. And I'm sure that we will be able to discuss this evening all the other implications.
Thank you, General Ayish. And I certainly want to discuss that dilemma in its many forms and permutations. I just one quick follow-on question for you. Is there a specific turning point that led to this new phase of the war? And as you said, I just want to reinforce for our audience what we're talking about here, as General Ayish mentioned, is 5 to 10% of what the IDF could potentially be operating with here. So what the JINSA report that came out today is describing a scenario that's certainly beyond what we're seeing right now, but in which in the current atmosphere could be potentially moving forward on the horizon. But General Ayish, is there a specific turning point? I know it can always be hard to discover such things, but what's driving this new phase? It seems to me that since the Hezbollah strike on Majd al-Shams in late July that killed 12 Druze youngsters in the Golan Heights, it seems from safely from 6,000 miles away over here that has sort of raised the temperature on things. But I would love to get your thoughts on that and more broadly on why is this happening now?
I think the major thing that have happened is a very clear decision taken by the Israeli government, stated by the Israeli Prime Minister, saying that the mission to the IDF since 8 days ago is to restore security and to allow the Israeli residents of the north to be back to their villages and to their houses. That was the clear strategic goal given by the Israeli government to the IDF. It led to a series of activities, and I mentioned some of them we won't be able to discuss, and the majority is still in the IDF backpack, ready to be activated. However, it changed dramatically the situation, and we can see that, let's take only today, 1,000 strikes, Israeli strikes in Lebanon. We know that the IDF and the Air Force can perform something like 3,000 strikes on a daily basis. And that's why I think this move, and not to mention all the other preparations, such as the ground forces and many other activities, could be a game changer. But all of those are tools in the IDF arsenal, and they have only one mission, is to restore security and to allow the residents of the north back to their houses. There are different ways that it can be implemented, partially or in a very comprehensive way, yet to be decided. We were trying to disconnect Hezbollah from what have happened in the south without too much success, although we had a very significant operational success over there. More than 500 operatives, Hezbollah operatives, were eliminated in the last 11 months. This is prior all the other attacks that took place. And still, strategically speaking, it didn't fulfill the strategic goal. And that's why we are in a new situation right now, and the rest is yet to be seen.
Thank you, General Ayish. General Amidror, I'd like to turn to you to go from the more strategic, maybe down to the operational. I saw recently, I believe over the weekend, it was reported messaging, what seems like new messaging from both Israel and the United States, that this heightened pace of IDF operations is meant to support diplomacy to get a ceasefire on the blue line. I would love your assessment on whether you agree with that statement, that this could be translated into a diplomatic achievement to remove the threat to Israel's north. And then a follow-on question: if that fails, is Israel prepared to go in on the ground and remove this immediate threat to its north?
Yeah, thank you for the good question. But before that, I want to add something to General Ayish's explanation. I think that what happened and changed the situation is three different events. One is the feeling in Israel, based on the judgment on the ground, that in Gaza we succeeded to eliminate the military capability of Hamas. It's not relevant anymore to the question, okay, how Hamas will react, what Hamas will do, and so forth. And we are fighting now in Lebanon, and Hamas does nothing. Totally nothing. It's not relevant anymore. The fact that we don't have another front was very significant when we deal with the other front. First. Second, someone had to make decision when it was clear that about the all electronic devices in Lebanon, the other you use it or lose it. And it probably was not planned. It happened according to the media, and the decision was taken. And since the minute that was decided, the situation was totally different, because in a few minutes, more than a few thousand Hezbollah members had been injured or killed. And that is the second element. The third one is the pressure here in Israel about bringing back the almost 100,000 refugees inside Israel back to their homes. And because it was clear that the Americans are not going to achieve any agreement. The combination of the Americans are not achieving any agreement and the the feeling that we should do whatever is needed, that they will come back home. This combination is the third element in the calculus which made the different situation on the ground relating to Lebanon. And the result is escalation in the Israeli reaction. The numbers which had been mentioned by General Ayish, it's not the whole potential of the IDF, but it is very high. But I want to warn. I heard here in Israel, some people are speaking about Israel is very close to destroy. We are coming to the point in which they are losing their capabilities. Guys, whatever was done today with all the success, it's probably 10, maybe 20% of the capacity of Hezbollah. And we have to be very cautious not to go to conclusions too early, only because we have such fantastic and successful operations during the last 2 weeks. You know, all the old members of the leadership of Hezbollah, but Nasrallah, had been eliminated. All the names that I dealt with when I was in the north don't exist. The last one was eliminated today, Karki. It's the last one that I know from the leadership. All the others are very young, or one forces, commanders are very young. So the fact that we succeeded to eliminate the leadership of not the leader, but the leadership of Hezbollah, and to hit so many of them in the fantastic operation of the pagers. You know, in the Arab world, they call it Eid al-Pager. Not Eid al-Fitr, but Eid al-Pager. And the success of the IDF Air Force today to hit so many targets, and I don't know if you saw pictures from the area, you can see the secondary explosions, that it is a huge place in which they continue to explode more than 3 minutes after the IDF hit the targets, because the huge number of missiles and rockets under the ground. I don't know if it's all the storage, how or production place, I don't know. But that was huge success, we have to admit. At the end, we decided in the last 20 years to invest our resources to build our capacity to fight in Lebanon, and you see the results. It works.
Thank you, General. And you've raised a lot of issues that I certainly want to get to, including what Hezbollah's response might be, and some broader implications where we are going forward.
They don't know what the reaction will be. So you want me to know what the reaction will be?
Well, I do want to unpack what their reactions could be. I know I don't want us to presume to read too far inside everyone's minds.
If I may add something about the new policy that we are dealing with. What was changed here is the preemptive approach was adopted by the Israeli government and by the IDF. It means, and this is something that was declared by the Israeli Prime Minister and the Chief of the General Staff, so I can share it in a very open way here. Whenever we see a threat, an imminent threat, we are about to remove it. And that's the big change. So when they wanted in the last few days, and they prepared launchers and rockets to be launched towards Israel, they were eliminated. By the way, and I'm very careful here about the data, what was published already by the IDF today is that 50% of their arsenal in terms of rockets was eliminated. However, we should bear in mind that they have another 75,000. And when you are adding to it the launching capacity, they can, as General Amidror said, create or inflict a significant damage. But the preemptive approach here is a key player. No longer an equation, not waiting any longer for them to do that and us to retaliate, but to prevent whatever they are trying to do in a very precise way. And that's why we started to push the population out of their houses, because everything over there in the southern part of Lebanon and the Bekaa Valley is totally embedded into the villages. And we were asking the inhabitants of those villages to leave their houses at least for 1,000 meters. 1,000 meters, because this is the security area in which they can stay out without being harmed when we are attacking the target.
Thank you, General.
If I can add something,
Please.
which is even higher than what was just said by General Ayish, the decision to preempt. I think that here what we see is something different from the past. We don't want in Israel a big war, but we are much ready to take bigger risk that we will face a war if that serves our needs to erode the capabilities of Hamas. When you are ready to take the risk of having a war, a big war, a full-out war, your hands are less tied than before, than the previous situation, in which you say, okay, I don't know, it might lead to a war. Today, it might lead to a war. It's okay, we are ready. So I think that the combination of the readiness to take higher risks and the result of it is preemptive policy, and the result of it is huge amount of strikes hitting the most important parts of the other side capability, that together build a different new situation.
So, General Amidror, thank you for bringing that up. I know I'm sort of jumping around here, but you mentioned in your most recent comment there readiness for a big war and the changing risk calculus there. And I know for Israelis, this is already in everyone's minds. But could you give some context maybe for our more American audiences? When you say the big war, what are you talking about that's different than what's going on right now? Because if you're doing a casual job of reading the headlines here, it already looks like a pretty big escalation. So can you paint for our audience what you're talking about that's different than now?
Yes, a big war means that both sides are taking many limitations that they have today. For example, they will begin to bomb Tel Aviv. Tedahia probably will be destroyed, south part of Beirut. Israeli ground forces will go into Lebanon to clean the area from all the launching pads of Hezbollah in the south, to push and to destroy Hamas. So Hezbollah, that no member of Hezbollah will be south of the line, which will be determined by Israel. At the end, we want to build here a different situation on the ground, that Hezbollah will not have the ability to make in the future any operation which is like or imitating 7th of October. And for that, no member of Hezbollah will be in the south. So they will have to cross a buffer zone that will allow us to be better prepared. We want to be in a position that we don't, unlike in the past, we don't hesitate to act in Lebanon. In the past, we didn't act in Lebanon. We were very, we had very extensive operations in Syria, but none in Lebanon. In the future, we will not live in this situation. We will be very active in Lebanon. For that, we have to take as many capabilities as possible from Hezbollah, so that Hezbollah will not in a position to deter us in the future. So in the end, Israel will have two goals in Lebanon. One, to clean the south from Hezbollah, that no one can think about ground strike into Israel like the 7th of October. And the second one is that Lebanon is a free ground that allow, the situation in Lebanon is such which allows the IDF to act against any attempt of Hezbollah to rearm, and every facility of Hezbollah, every stronghold of Hezbollah. We will not let Hezbollah to build again the beast that we are facing now. For that, we have to do two different kind of wars. One is in the south to clean it and probably that cannot be done without ground forces. And the other one is to take those capabilities of Hamas of Hezbollah to the level which allow us in the future to feel free to act in Lebanon.
So thank you, General Amidror. I want to bring in John here. We've been sort of very thoroughly studying the scene for the context of current events. So John, on a recent JINSA webinar, I believe right after Hezbollah military commander Fuad Shukr was killed in Beirut, and then Ismail Haniyeh was taken out in Tehran. On a JINSA webinar, you made the point that whoever is doing all these things certainly is providing a lot of value added as an ally for the United States, and is demonstrating some incredible intelligence and tactical and operational capabilities. Fast forward to now, based on what we've heard Generals Ayish and Amidror say, seems like there's been a real sort of change in the air pressure around the Middle East in the last 6 weeks or so. How do you assess where the United States, the sort of official posture from the Biden administration, has been on these events? I know I said at the outset that there's still routine calls for de-escalation, but we've maybe seen some on the one hand, on the other hand, comments coming out of American officials' mouths. So I would love your assessment of where you think the United States is viewing these issues, where we currently stand.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. And first of all, let me just congratulate you as the primary author on this new report that we've released today, which, as you said, extremely timely, talking about the next Northern War, which now looks like it could be almost upon us. So I urge everybody to go look at that. Listen, first a word about what happened, or what has happened over the last week. I said to a reporter on Friday after the Israeli strike on this Radwan Force Command headquarters and meeting that was happening in the Dahya in southern Beirut, that at that point, over the last 4 days, Israel had inflicted more damage on Hezbollah than the United States has done in the last 40 years. And it's absolutely crucial, as General Ayish mentioned, that every single American needs to understand that whether it was end of July, this character Fuad Shukr, whether it was on Friday, this guy Ibrahim Akil, these are people who intimately involved in massive attacks on American diplomatic and military facilities in Beirut 40 years ago, and in addition to a range of other crimes, including attacks on Americans. Hundreds of American servicemen, diplomats, CIA officials were killed. These guys had their blood on their hands for 4 decades. And Israel is the one that's eliminating them, redeeming the blood of those brave Americans who had died in those attacks. I mean, we could hold a completely separate webinar to figure out how big an effort the United States has made over the last 40 years to wreak and deliver the kind of justice that Israel has delivered on behalf of not only Israel's national interest, but on behalf of a lot of Americans who have been living with this for the past 40 years. So it's a huge service. And I just, I'm not an active user of social media, but when I look at a few accounts of what former American intelligence officers and military officials are saying on social media, they're cheering and applauding and thanking Israel for what it's done over the last several days to this terrorist organization. Listen, I think with regard to American policy, for 11 months, there has been this fetishization about de-escalation and avoiding escalation. And I think it's a complete misunderstanding of how diplomacy and force and credible force are completely intertwined. As I think they attribute it to Frederick the Great, that diplomacy without arms is like music without instrument. It just will not work. And what Israel is doing in providing this kind of escalation, dominance, and power against our enemy, if we're going to have any chance of avoiding a completely full-blown war here, and having any kind of interim diplomatic solution in which northern Israel is secure, those people return to their homes, and the threat in southern Lebanon is dramatically reduced. It's only any American diplomacy in that direction is only going to have half a chance of succeeding if Israel is doing what it's the type of thing it's doing now. That's what gives America, should be the thing that gives American diplomacy whatever leverage it has. I'm happy that I heard over the last several days that a second aircraft carrier is now being sent back into the region. There was another word today, although no details, about additional American forces coming back into the theater. I think that's entirely good, because I think now is precisely the time in which, if we're going to have any chance of getting any kind of interim diplomatic solution, of having this Israeli escalation succeed and allowing them to begin putting people back in the north, it is only going to come from the Iranians first and foremost, and Hezbollah actually seeing that there is no daylight between Israel and the United States. And this is a war. 60 to 80,000 Israelis have had to evacuate their homes. They're internal refugees in their own society. If this the equivalent in the United States, I don't know. It's 2-3 million people having to evacuate our southern border, emptying out all of San Diego, all of El Paso. You know, Americans wouldn't stand for this for 11 days, let alone 11 months. They would be demanding an immediate solution to this problem, to doing whatever it takes to get this resolved. And that is what Israel's doing. It's appropriate, entirely appropriate and just and legitimate. And America's job now is to be backing. If Israel is taking on these additional risks, willing to go to war if that's what it takes, to restore its full sovereignty in the north and restore deterrence across this region against common enemies who are not only constantly attacking Israel, seeking to destroy Israel, but want to drive America out of this region. Our job, one, is to make sure that our ally has everything it needs in this fight to be as effective as possible, as quickly as possible, and that the American-Israeli alliance wins over and is seen as victorious across this region and having the upper hand over an Iranian-backed ring of fire and axis of resistance that is looking to take both of our countries down.
Thank you, John. And as usual, you teed me up very well for another question. And this is going to loop in a question from our audience. General Ayish, I'll ask this question to you. John mentioned, of course, the word daylight, which routinely comes up in these discussions. JINSA has a pretty simple algebraic formula. It's the less daylight, the less between the United States and Israel, the less our shared adversaries from Iran and others try to expand their aggression around the region. So, General Ayish, a question for you: how problematic is it that the United States has been withholding certain arms transfers from Israel? To what extent does Israel need these, and do they have alternative sources?
Okay, thank you. Let me share with you some numbers just to give our audience, the feeling of what does it mean a day like today? How many targets were attacked? How many, bombs were thrown by the Israeli Air Force? Today, the Air Force attacked 1,100 targets, 1,100. And for that, they've used only today something around 1,400, 1,500 bombs. If you would multiply in the next, I would say, 10 to 20 days, you can understand that we are, and this is without really pushing to the full capacity. Remember what I was saying at the beginning, that we are talking here about 5 to 10% of the IDF capacity. If they will push it to the limit, we are talking here about 20, 25,000. And I would like to link it to what John was saying. The fact that we have here a significant US presence is vital for 4 reasons. One of them is the strategic reason, deterrence, and the clear signal not only to Israel, and not only to the moderate camp, but to the whole region. And then when you are, when you are adding on it the layer of logistic support, all type of supply that can be made based on those forces, intelligence support, and I don't want to elaborate to other options that JINSA have published in the last 4 years, almost a few times a year, like prepositioning and many other capabilities. When you are thinking about that, and the fact that we are talking here about a regional threat, because obviously we are talking here about Hezbollah, but yesterday the cruise missiles that were launched from Iraq. And last week, the ballistic missile that was launched from Yemen. And to that level, it's so significant. And the fact that the US forces are deployed here for these 4 reasons are vital. And I would like to stress the fact that you have the availability to be resupplied, replenished, and people have to understand, we are talking here about 24 days to ship a shipment from the US East Coast to Israel. And when you are talking about heavy bombs, it's not something that you can based only on airlift capability. So the US presence, by all means, is very important, and we are in a stage that the mission is clear, the strategic goal is very clear, and the threat is imminent. Hence, we have no other reason but to use whatever tools we have, and it seems like we have the right tools so far in order not just to do it effectively, but to do it in a very precise way. Last word, the reports today from Lebanon are talking about hundreds of operatives that were killed. Those who didn't left those targets that we declared that we are about to attack.
Jonathan, can I just say on your point about the whatever arms we've withheld, while I complimented the administration, if it is, continuing to surge forces to the region to really send a strong deterrent message and that we've got Israel's back, it seemed to me that last week, having put Hezbollah on the defensive, not knowing exactly what choice Hezbollah and Iran will make, was precisely the time you would have surged. You would have released whatever hold you had on those 2,000-pound bombs, knowing how vital those would be to Israel's operations against against all of those Hezbollah rockets and long-range missiles. But you would have accelerated whatever you had in the pipeline and made it very public and clear that this was happening because Israel has shifted to a different phase. It's been forced to do that, and it is no longer, it's refusing to play the tit for tat kind of game it's been in the last 11 months while it dealt with the Gaza front. And now that front is under far better control, Israel's shifting, and I think American policy has got to shift with it if we're hoping to keep this conflict under some kind of threshold of all-out regional war.
Yeah, thank you, John. That was a great point. And I want to return back to that before we end the discussion, because we're obviously talking about much broader regional implications beyond just what's going across the blue line right now, as intense as that is. General Amidror, I'd like to pick back up on a thread from earlier, which is certainly, we don't know what Hezbollah is going to do next. But what are you looking for as indications that it's willing to get into an escalation spiral with Israel, for lack of a better term, versus de-escalate and eventually potentially wind down all these attacks that have been going on for months now? What are you looking for specific indicators from Hezbollah in their response?
I think that if we see tonight or tomorrow that they are launching missiles into cities in Israel, Haifa, Tel Aviv, and so on, that might be the first hint that they are ready for a big escalation. I don't believe that they have in their pocket something which is totally different from what they use up till now. They can do more of the same. Unlike Israel, which has some cards that might change the situation and make some different actions within the ordinary situation that we know for a few months. And you saw the beginning, what was said by the General Ayish, that preempt and to initiate, not to wait to the other side step, but to take your steps whenever you think that you can achieve the goal, and the readiness to go to far away bombs in Baalbek, in Debka, and so on. I don't think that Hezbollah has any, big surprise. What we will see is more of the same. They launch rockets and missiles into Israel. Now they're ready to do it instead of 50 kilometers to 100 and 150 kilometers. They made it on places in Israel which are not so significant. Now they're ready to move to other places which are more significant. Probably Haifa will be the first one, because it's close to Lebanon. I don't see something which will put us in a dangerous situation of not having answers to the challenge and not understanding, okay, what will be the next stage. It is, at the end of the day, very like the past. More of the same, more missiles, more rockets, maybe drones. This very peculiar cruise missile, which was neutralized today or yesterday, which is a Russian one for very long range with 300 kilometers, with the warhead, with very big warhead. I don't know how many of them they have, but this is what might make the difference from their point of view. It very much depends on how much of the accurate missiles had been destroyed by us, because this is the real threat to Israeli system, is the long range, very precise weapons, missiles with the big warheads. That might be the area in which we might face a problem if they still have this capability. The combination of big warhead with accurate targeting, it might bring problems to our side. So if there is something that might surprise us, this is the area of very precise weapon systems.
So thank you, General. A quick sort of follow-up question. Since the attack a week ago, in which all these pagers and other electronics were exploding across Lebanon in the hands of Hezbollah operatives, is it too soon to tell, or can we tell? Is it possible to see if there's been any impact on Hezbollah in terms of their willingness or ability to keep attacking Israel, or maybe it's too soon to tell?
I don't see any sign that it is any change in their will to do. No question that the fact that so many members of Hezbollah in the medium levels, we don't give pager to someone who is just carrying missiles from play A to play B. Give it to those people that you want to control, and you want through them to control the system. So this is for sure made a very big arm to the capabilities of Hezbollah, but not to the level in which it is neutralizing their ability and their will to launch rockets into Israel.
Mm-hmm.
This is not enough. It's a good beginning, but it's not even the beginning or the end of the first stage. It's a good beginning, that's all. It's a good opening,
Mm-hmm.
but that will not determine the results of the war.
Thank you. And General Ayish, I'd like to turn to you. Similar question to what I asked General Amidror, because it's such a big one in terms of what comes next. But I'd like to loop in a question from one of JINSA's General and Admirals program alums, General Sam Mundy, who asks, does Israel have any concerns about the potential for lateral escalation from Iranian proxies in Iraq, Yemen, and is the ongoing display of Israeli capability and intent in Lebanon sufficient to deter this horizontal escalation?
If I may refer to the term deterrence. Deterrence is not a relevant term at the moment. Definitely deterrence so far have failed. So what we see here today is the Israeli capabilities fully deployed in terms of defense and offense ready to be used, not only in one area, in every area. I've already mentioned Iraq, didn't mention Syria, but it's also a significant threat, mainly by the militias from there. And we saw some UAVs coming from that area towards the area of Bet Shean and the Jordan Valley, and obviously the Houthis in Yemen. The only player that was suppressed significantly so far is Hamas, and we have to keep in mind that the IDF is still fighting not only in Philadelphia axis, but also in Netzarim corridor as we speak.
Still taking casualties.
To include, exactly, and suffering from casualties, and to include surgical operations that the IDF is conducting on a daily basis in Judea and Samaria. And we saw some of it last week, and it happened on a daily basis. So everything is already happening, and the readiness is there. However, when we are talking about the next phases, I think we are making a grave mistake if we are thinking in terms of sequencing our steps. The instructions to the IDF is to eliminate threats and to create conditions. It means once the IDF identified the threat, and the threat is imminent, as it happened today and the day before, they have to eliminate it. They don't have to wait. We should take the term tit for tat out of the equation, no longer equation. And that's why it's so significant. And I think the dilemma now is not only for Hezbollah, it's also for the Iranians, because it might lead them, to use the arsenal, to use the capabilities that's so well described in JINSA's publication, and not where they wanted to. They thought that they can control, that they can contain the escalation. And it seems to me like in the last 8 or 10 days, they are surprised. And that's the big if here. Because if the Iranians are going to allow it, it might lead to escalation not only here, not only in Lebanon, but somewhere else. We don't have the time, but maybe we can discuss it in some other option. We have to remember that today with the oil production of the Iranians, that they can make something like $80 billion a year. It's not the situation as it was 4 years ago, when they were producing something like 300,000 barrels a day. Today they are making 3 million, 4 million. So with that, they can easily replenish, they can rebuild, they can empower those proxies. The economic part, the need to choke their ability to replenish and to rebuild themselves is vital. Otherwise, it's only a matter of time that we will face this type of war again and again. And we have to remember that.
So
that's this is why, by the way, the goal of the IDF at the end is not only to bring back the Israelis to their homes. It is also to allow the IDF to prevent Hezbollah from regrouping and rearming itself after the formal end of the war.
So that's, once again, your clairvoyance impresses me. I guess a follow-on question for General Ayish. You mentioned, Iran's material ability to keep funding aggression and this military-industrial complex with its proxies. We have a question from our audience that the Syria aspect of this, even if the IDF performs successful operations against Hezbollah, there's still this problem of Iran's ability to resupply Hezbollah via Syria. So what can Israel do to tackle this problem, and what can the U.S. do to help, I guess, is the best way to ask it.
Okay, we don't have the time to discuss a campaign between wars, but definitely it won't be relevant as it was in the last decade. The need to deal not only with stockpiles, but also with the industrial base and the replenishing capabilities of Hezbollah is vital here. And one of the major sources for the Iranians to resupply Hezbollah was made by Syria. And for that, they were using the air channel, the ground channel, and they were using equipment that allegedly the Syrians were buying from the Russians. And I'm talking here about serious capabilities, such as air defense capabilities, shore-to-sea missiles capabilities, and so on. So they were using those capabilities as stockpiles that were secured, allegedly, in Syria, and they started to transfer them. In many cases, when we have identified it, we eliminated it. But we can see today that it wasn't 100%, and we will have to deal with it. But this is only one channel. Mm-hmm. There are many other channels that we can discuss that the Iranians were using. And we can see they were using it not only to arm Hezbollah, but also to rearm Hamas. And back then, they were doing it via the Red Sea, Sudan, into the Sinai Peninsula, and then into Gaza. And the same that they were doing with the Houthis in Yemen. That's how they have rearmed them. But the original capability is based on resources. And that's why I insist that the economic sanctions are vital here. Without that, you won't be able to choke that element, and we have to stop it. And by really degrading the capabilities of Hezbollah on one hand, and minimizing the revenues of the Iranians on the other hand, we'll be able to deal with it together with some other operational capabilities that will have to be implemented.
And here we have to emphasize two issues to emphasize. One, there is such an effort to bring weapon systems and money to the West Bank, because what they want is to ignite the West Bank, something that they didn't succeed to do in the last war. Maybe strategically, it's the greatest failure of Sinwar. It didn't succeed to ignite his own people in the West Bank and Jerusalem. The second thing that I want to emphasize, all what was said by General Ayish, you have to remember that this is on the basis of very bad economic situation in Iran. It's not that Iran is flourishing and you will take part of what they produce and that will be they will miss in the basket that they are allocating to the proxies. No. The situation in Iran is very, very bad. There are people who do not have money to buy food. The ratio between dollar and the real is unbelievable, 5,000 something or 60 something. It's very bad situation economically. If you succeeded to choke Iran by sanctions, on top of the bad situation of today, you might lead to something even bigger than just preventing them to finance the proxies. You might shake the regime, which is very important to achieve. Intentionally, we don't know to do it intentionally. We don't have a plan how to do it, but by choking their economy in the very grave situation of the today economy of Iran, this combination might change the strategic situation completely.
And so thank you, General Amidror. And those words, strategic situation, will give me a good tee for the last question to ask John here, which is obviously looming behind everything that happens in Lebanon is the issue of Iran, and that's a regional threat not only for Israel but for the United States and all our partners in the region. So I guess, John, given what we've heard today and what we know is the larger strategic backdrop, which JINSA just put out a report explaining how the United States is sleepwalking into a nuclear Iran. I imagine the perspective is different in Israel, but from America, we're talking about there's unlikely to be a prompt for any serious action in one form or another from the U.S. for months. What's the art of the possible here for the United States to try to avoid a broader conflict, address Iranian aggression and escalation? Again, the phrase "art of the possible" is doing all the heavy lifting in that question. But what is realistic for the United States to try to help not only Israel but the broader interest in regional stability here?
Well, I mean, I think you hit it on the head, Jonathan. From an American standpoint, all of this leads to a single point, which is stopping a nuclear Iran, which I think would change the world, change the threats to American interests, change the threats to the overall global order. And I think everything we're seeing with Israel fighting on 7 fronts against an Iranian ring of fire, fighting to degrade significantly the capabilities of Iran's most potent proxy terrorist army in Hezbollah, all of that was built to deter America and Israel and the West from going after the Iranian nuclear program. It, of course, was designed to destroy Israel and weaken Israel and drive America out, but it was also that threat of this massive, devastating war that was protecting the Iranian nuclear program from coming under attack. Fear of that war and what it might do to the region and to Israel specifically. Israel is now, I think, engaged in an effort to really weaken that alliance and to degrade the capabilities of Iran's most powerful proxies. We're participating in that to some extent with what we do in Yemen and the Red Sea against the Houthis. I think far more probably needs to be done. But I think all of this, rather than being looked at as some kind of detriment or danger or risk to American interests, and of course, nobody wants a much broader war, but we need to understand this strategically, that Israel is now engaged in a battle that if they're successful, particularly regarding Hezbollah, and this is the Iranian dilemma, are they now prepared to lose Hezbollah over Hezbollah's efforts to defend Hamas? And how vulnerable will that create Iran? I think we're creating a new strategic equation, and we and the Israelis together need to think about how we create this new regional strategic equation that ultimately will lead us to a decision on how we're going to prevent a nuclear Iran from emerging over some time over the course of the next presidential administration.
Thank you, John. And there was so much more I wanted to get to today and to pick the brains of all our panelists, but I think of the more than 100 webinars I've done in recent years, this one has gone the fastest. And I think that's a commendation of the discussion we've had today from our panelists. I want to thank them, as always, for their participation. I don't know how many nights of General Amidror's and General Ayish's I've taken up in recent weeks, so I want to thank them for that. And one final bit of housekeeping for our audience. I want to invite everyone to JINSA's U.S. Israel National Security Conference on November 19th and 20th in Aventura, Florida. It's a unique opportunity to hear from top U.S. and Israeli military leaders, including the former head of U.S. Central Command, General Frank McKenzie, who also has a new paper available on JINSA's website, as well as today's panelists, General Ayish and John Hanna. They, along with other distinguished speakers, will discuss key security issues shaping the Middle East. You can RSVP by visiting our website or by emailing Jake Shapiro at jshapiro@jinsa.org. Again, that's November 19th and 20th in Aventura, Florida. You can also go to JINSA's website to see today's report, which has a brief executive summary in addition to its detailed analysis, and for all other JINSA materials. Thank you again all for joining. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you all.